Good evening and good Yom Tov. And Bruchim Haboim to the Farbrengen of Yud Daled Kislev, which was hosted by Vechom. Besides the fact that this is, I'm sure, going to be an informative and uplifting program, it's also a Chassidish Farbrengen. So B'meila, we'll start with L'chaim, and anybody who can join together from the whole world to say L'chaim on such a special and auspicious day. L'chaim, L'chaim. As Chassidim, anything which is connected to the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, even something which was private in their own personal life, is something which is relevant, and every Chassid cares about it and takes interest in it. And especially something so significant, so important in the Rebbe's life. But in addition to that, just like any person's chasana is a major event in his life, and in fact, a chasana completes a person's neshama. The Zohar says that every person, before he gets married, is a plagufa, is a half a person. And when he gets married, he completes his neshama. And as a result of completing his neshama, now he can start doing his complete Aveda, the way the Aveda is supposed to be. So it's self-understood that the Rebbe, who's a Nasi Adir, so something which is neged to the Rebbe is neged to the entire generation. And since the Rebbe's chasana, the Rebbe became complete, so to speak. The Rebbe and the Rebbetzin became one, so became now a complete inyan. So from Yud Daled Kislev, Tofreish Peites, at the Rebbe's chasana, that's when the Rebbe started in a complete way his Aveda. And the Rebbe said this actually very clearly at a Farbrengen, in connection actually to the Frierdiker Rebbe's chasana on Yud Gimel Elul, Tofshin Yud Daled. The Rebbe said that when a Rebbe, when a Nasi Adir gets married, so that starts his Aveda, because now he's a complete neshama. And the Rebbe said that's why the Rebbe Rashab said a lot of Chassidus at the Frierdiker Rebbe's chasana, Chassidus in a tremendous amount. In fact, the Rebbe said a story that in the middle of the Maimer, the Rebbe Rashab paused, and the Rebbe Rashab needed to look up a certain inyan in the middle of the Maimer in the ksav that he wrote. And the Rebbe said it never happened before and never happened after. And to say that a Rebbe forgot something doesn't make sense. So the Rebbe explained that since there was so much there was so much Torah being said there on such a high level, on a level that was never like that before. So therefore, he needed to go to the source. He needed to bring down the inyan from the source, from the way he wrote it down in his ksav. So it's understood that such a day like Yud Daled Kislev, the day that completes the Rebbe's Aveda, that the Rebbe's Neshama, now the Rebbe's Aveda starts, is a tremendous day. But to add to all of that, the Rebbe himself shared this day with us and explained to us in numerous ways and numerous times the significance and the importance of this day, and shared it with us in different ways. The Rebbe Farbrengen for us a number of times in connection to the anniversary, to Yud Daled Kislev. We were zeicha in the very last year, Tafshin and Beis. The Rebbe handed out to each chassid a noshim v'taf, a special kuntres that I have right here, a special kuntres that was the Drushei Chasana, the Maimorim that the Friedrich Rebbe said during the time of the Chasana, before the Chasana, in connection to the Ufruf, and during throughout the Sheva Brachas, and also there were two Maimorim that the Rebbe himself said, and the Rebbe was Magia. So the Rebbe shared with us this day. So obviously it's a day that we need to come together and Farbrengen, and first of all celebrate it and be besimcha on such a special day, and also obviously take heroes from such a day in our Aveda. The program tonight is going to be divided in three general ideas. We're going to discuss some of the things that took place at the Chasana, Yud Daled Kislev Tofreish Peites, when the Chasana took place 93 years ago. We're also going to obviously discuss what we can learn out of it in our Aveda and Dei Hashvi'i, and also to discuss some of the things that happened throughout the years by the Rebbe, how the Rebbe celebrated this day with Chassidim. It's interesting to note that the Rebbe wrote a letter to Rabbi Yisrael Neach Belenitsky from in France. At that time, this is, I believe, Toshin Yud Ches, they were printing the Maimorim of Samach to Samach, the Maimorim that the Rebbe Rashab said during the Chasna of the Friedrich Rebbe. And the Rebbe wrote to him like this. He wrote that we would want to have more details from Barei Samcha, people who are reliable, and we're at the Chasana. And the Rebbe said we see the importance to know everything and as many details as possible Oidos Chasunas Rabbeinu, about the Chasna of our Rebbe. So therefore, the Rebbe said we're going to bring together Yidden that their fathers or their grandfathers. I'm reading off the letter of the Rebbe. Heveinu poi kama Yehudim she'aviem oizkenam, that their father or their grandfather hoyu ba'isei Muhammad v'yichalku imanu, and they should share with us Masha Shomu. So the first part of tonight's program, we're going to hear from different Chassidim that their fathers or their grandfathers were zeicha to be at the Rebbe's Chasana, or at celebrations that were connected with the Rebbe's Chasana. And we're going to begin with Rabbi Nussi Nosson Gerari, the Shliach to Buffalo. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it here live, but he did record for us a few minutes of him talking what he heard from his father, Reb Zalman Olav Shalom Gerari, who also was zeicha a number of times to give the Rebbe brachas in B'Shem, in the name of all of Chassidim, in connection with the Rebbe's Chasana. So we're going to ask Rabbi Nosson Gerari to continue the Farbrengen.
Good Yantif, alle Chassidim. Such a holy day, Yom HaBoher, the day that the Rebbe himself said, this is the day that I became connected to us Chassidim, and the day that we connect to him. What can be a brighter Yontif day than Yud Daled Kislev? So I would like to just mention some interesting points that I heard from my father, Olav Shalom, who was by all the three Chassinis of the three daughters of the Friedrich Rebbe, and of course the Chassine of the Rebbe. It's interesting to note that my father was actually, the Friedrich Rebbe paid for his tickets and for his expenses to be by the Chassan, by all Chassinis. And he remembered exactly all the different things that took place, this unbelievable event of the Chasana of the Rebbe. One of the things that my father told me, that the Rebbe himself, once on Yechidus, my father used to be involved in taking care of the Rebbetzin. And all of the expenses, everything he took care of, but the Rebbe told him that he has to give the Rebbe a detailed cheshbon of all the hotzos. And the Rebbe continued, because this is what he signed at what the Kesubah. He committed himself for that, and therefore he himself wants to pay for all the expenses. And the Rebbe said to him, and the Rebbe told his story, that the Kesubah actually was lost by the Chasana. So the din is that you can't go home without a Kesubah. So the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin went to the Frierdiker Rebbe's home, and the Frierdiker Rebbe himself wrote the Kesubah with his holy handwriting, and that was the Kesubah that the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Rebbe had all the years. So this is something that the Rebbe himself shared to my father about an episode that took place at the Chasana. One of the things that my father told us is that everything about the Chasana had to be with a tremendous order. And everything was outlined, what should happen, who should be here, who should be there. By the way, just for information, every time by the Frierdiker Rebbe's Yontif or Shabbos, whenever there were guests, there was always a reshima given to the Frierdiker Rebbe before the Yontif or before the Shabbos, and the Frierdiker Rebbe personally outlined where everyone should sit. You just didn't pick a chair where you want to sit. Every place was Mesuda, who should sit where. So, of course, by this Chasana, there was a tremendous Seder that the Frierdiker Rebbe insisted. And one of the things was that the Bachrim have to stand all the way in the back, opposite the head table, but all the way in the back. They stood all the time with a tremendous derech eretz and bittul, but it was very difficult because they felt that they can't really hear anything what's going on because they are way in the back. Nevertheless, the Frierdiker Rebbe felt for the Bachrim that they were told that they have to stand all the way in the back. So the Frierdiker Rebbe himself went with a towel over his shoulder like a butler, and he went all the way back to give mashke to the Bachrim, and the Frierdiker Rebbe said a sicha to them. And this is one of the things that he always reminded us and told us about the bittul and mesiras nefesh of the Bachrim, and the love that the Frierdiker Rebbe showed to the Bachrim, that they listened, and he felt with them and gave them a special kirov. Also, as some memories was that there was one of the Polish Rebbes that came to the Chasana was the Amshenover Rebbe. Me'ezer tam she'yir, the Frierdiker Rebbe had a special derech eretz for him. And he happened to come in to the Chasana in middle of the Frierdiker Rebbe saying the Maimah L'Chadoidi. Amazing that the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he saw him, stopped the Maimah, was Mechabed the Amshin of a Rebbe to come to his seat, asked the Amshin of a Rebbe, can he continue with the Maimah? And then, of course, the Frierdiker Rebbe continued the Maimah. This is a very interesting, important story. How there are many different Chashiva people that came there, and how much the Frierdiker Rebbe gave them the cheretz that to interrupt even in the middle of a Maimah. Another thing that we all know, that when the Frierdiker Rebbe put on the gartel on the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe said to the Rebbe that when he made the bracha in the morning, Oize Yisrael B'Gvura, he had in mind what he's doing now with the Rebbe. So these are more or less some of the stories that I remembered my father telling us, who witnessed the Chassidus and was by all the Chassidus. Everyone should have a good yontif, and alle Yidden should have only simchis and brachas ad belidai, a good to yontif and a good to yar.
Yeshikoyach, l'chaim, l'chaim. We know that the Rebbe's parents were not able to make it to the Rebbe's Chasna. The Rebbe's Chasna was in Warsaw, was in Poland. And the Rebbe's parents were in Ukraine, in Yekaterinoslav. And the Rebbe's parents were not there. The Rebbe's father wrote a number of letters to the Rebbe before the Chasna. In fact, on the day of the Chasna, I believe, the Rebbe's father wrote a special telegram to the Rebbe with 101 words, bedafke, exactly 101 words. And Rebbetzin Chana, in her diaries, describes the way that Rebbe's father wrote that letter with tremendous tears, and he was sobbing, and the tablecloth was wet from the tears that he was while he was writing this letter. But in one of the letters that he wrote, the Rebbe's father wrote that we find that Yaakov Avinu, also his parents weren't at the wedding. Yaakov Avinu was sent by Yitzchak to go to Choron and find a wife there. And the Rebbe's father writes that nevertheless, the kol zeis Allah zivugei liyafe, his zivug was it was a good shidduch, ad me'ed, very much, v'niskayim bei, and it was Yaakov Avinu was zeicher to vayifrit so ish me'ed. Yaakov Avinu had a tremendous inyan of ufaratzno, of he burst forth as a result of listening to his father. And then the Rebbe's father continues, Al tidak, don't be concerned. Us, your father and your mother won't be at the chasana in a physical way, but we are going to be there in our heart and in our souls. At any distance will not be mafsik, will not separate us. We are going to be with you, and we're going to be giving you the brachas. Amongst the Chassidim that were at that Farbrengen in Yekaterinoslav was a Yid by the name of Reb Zalman Velenkin, who was zeicher to be the Rebbe's Melamed. And in fact, I heard that at the Chasna, he was at this event, at this special Chasna that took place in Yekaterinoslav, he was very besimcha. He was zeicher to be part of this special simcha. I think the Rebbe Tzanchana also wrote that that the neighbor, who usually was not friendly with them, felt the tremendous importance of making this event. He opened up his wall that was adjacent to the apartment of the Rebbe's parents, and he opened it up to make a larger hall so more people could fit in, even though he wasn't necessarily always happy with the noise that was going on in the Rebbe's father's house. As a Rav, there are many events going on. We have with us Rav Yehuda Leib Shapiro, the Rav of Anash in Miami, in the Rosh Yeshiva in Miami, who also happens to be my uncle. So I'm also a shtickle uncle of Reb Zalman Velenkin, to share with us some of the things that he heard from his Zayda in connection with that special event, Rabbi Shapiro?
And to be honest, I didn't hear many protim from him about the chasna, some protim, and those protim that I heard are mafursim, but nevertheless, I will repeat them. Some of them you just mentioned, I will repeat them, but I heard it from him. So when you hear it, again, from somebody who's klei sheni, not klei shlishi, not klei chamished, I heard it from him, but it's not many of the protim, but I heard some of the protim. And Vechom, what I'm going to say is going to be, obviously, since I'm saying it from as the anical of Reb Zalman Valenkin, I'm saying it from the perspective of him, his connection here. So I'll bring that out as much as he told us that. I remember what he told us when he gave these inyonim. So one of the things he told us, I remember he said, Agmas Nefesh, that the Rebbe's parents had that they can't come to the Chasana. And they really, really wanted to come, and they had Agmas Nefesh, and he knew about it. Well, because Zayda was very close to Rebbe Yitzchok. Actually, he was friends with him before Rebbe Yitzchok even went to Katrinaslav. They were bumping the Baranke. When Rebbe Yitzchok came to Katrinaslav, came to Rov there, and they needed a sheikhet, so he sent him a message, sent him a letter that we need shochtim, good shochtim, so if you could come to become a sheikhet. And he came. And when he came, there was no shechita available at that moment. So he gave him the job to be a malamed. And that's when he was teaching the Rebbe and his brothers and a few other children who were there. Then when the shechita became available, he didn't want to give him the shechita because he felt that he's a good malamed. He wants to keep it. Anyway, so they were friendly. So he knew, so he says, he remembers, he knew how the Agmas Nefesh they had that he couldn't come. So when they realized that he can't come to the chasana, that's when they decided they're going to make the chasana, a simcha chasana over there. And it was the first time in the whole city. In other words, it was the talk of the town that the Rav of the city is going to make a chasana, like a chasana in Katrinaslav. There was a very big crowd by the chasana. And as you heard before, the neighbor even allowed to open the wall, and they had give a bigger place. And there was a big elam there. And the expression, the way he said to me was, it was mamish like a real chasana. The only thing that was missing was the chosin kalam. But really, it was a complete chasana. My Zayde, Reb Shlomo Vilenkin, was very happy, was mamish ugilik by the chasana. Ad kedei kach that he jumped onto the table, and he was saying that I had the schus that my Talmud became the Chasan HaMelech, the Eidim of the king, became the Eidim of the Rebbe. Even though the simcha, he said, was, as we would say, bittersweet, because they felt that they're not by the chasana, but nevertheless, the simcha was strong, and he was part of the simcha. Not only was part of the simcha so much because he was the malamat of the Rebbe, of the chosin, but he felt, as I said before, very, very close to the family. He was like, I wouldn't say mishpacha kipshute, but he was very close to the Rebbe's father's family, to the Rebbe's family. The Mele he felt as part, and therefore he was very, very much besimcha. And he gave the telegram. He also told me, people know that what you heard before, that he wrote on the day of the Chassan, the Rebbe's father wrote this telegram, but this they found out when the Rebbe's letter was found, the Rishimis, and then from others, and Shmuel Shneerson, the Rebbe's uncle, etc., they wrote about this. But I heard it from my Zayda. My Zayda passed away in Tov Shin Chov Gimel. And I heard it from him before that, obviously, and Imamish exactly the same words as the Rebbetzin Chane writes. He said that the day of the Chasana, I didn't understand how he knew that, but could be he was very close to the family. But maybe he realized, and I don't think he was there, but he said, he told me this goes back before Tov Shin Chov Gimel, Chov Beis, Chov Aleph. He said that he remembers that the Rebbe's father wrote the telegram of 101 words. Mamish, that told me. And I knew it years before, 101 words. And he said it, wrote it with tears. And the Loshen Yitaka said, at the tishtach, the tablecloth became soaked of tears from writing this telegram. So, and this became, like, so to speak, the talk of the town. And the whole city was talking about the special simcha that was there. And everybody was mesameach in this simcha. Because beforehand, a little bit, when, as I mentioned before, that when the shechita became available, the Isaiah wanted the job now, because he only made him a malamed because the shechita wasn't available. He didn't want to let him. He wanted him to stay because of being a good malamed to his children. So Isaiah said he felt, a little bit tarumas that, I want that job, I didn't get it. But when it came to the Chasana, he was so besimcha. I'm thinking of Pshat that he poshet. That's when he expressed his, so to speak, his regret, why he felt bad then, that he was zeicha to such a great thing. And this connection to the Rebbe is not only to the Rebbe's father, but then later to the Rebbe, the bittul that he had to the Rebbe, even though this is something he gave to the Chassan. I'm just going to mention that Zayda, who I'm talking from his perspective, his connection to the Rebbe's family and the Rebbe's Chassan, so his connection to the Rebbe later as a Chassid was unbelievable. The bittul that he had to the Rebbe was unbelievable. The Rebbe himself also gave him covet. We know that when he came to America, he went into Yechidus, Tovshin Yud Gimel. And when he went inside Yechidus, the Rebbe stood up, and the Rebbe asked him to sit down. And he told the Rebbe he's not going to sit down. Even though he was paralyzed on one half of his body, he didn't sit down. And the Rebbe said, if you don't sit down, I'm also not going to sit down. So they stood the whole Yechidus, close to an hour, they stood both standing. Second, then he moved to Cleveland. When he came back from Cleveland to New York, so again he went into Yechidus. This must have been Tavshin Ches, maybe Zayin, I don't remember. They again went into Yechidus, and this time the Rebbe told him again to sit down, and he told the Rebbe he doesn't want to, but he has no choice. He just couldn't stand. So the Rebbe said to him, "Wir seien mit 40, 50 Jahren, I don't remember the Lashon." He said, "Seien wir gesessen bei ein Gemorre, weil wir sitzen zusammen." And the Rebbe quite a few times mentioned what his connection to Mazeda was. Once when I was in Yechidus with my father, and we speaking about Mazeda, when he was moving from Cleveland to New York, and they needed some help, so the Rebbe said, you should go to this and this person. I said, I think the name is Friedman, as in Bayana Rebbe Sazun. You should tell him in my name that I asked he should help. He worked, I guess, in the government office. And you could tell him that I still remember the Blätter Gemara that I learned with him. He said, and the Rebbe by Farbrengen once, he said that he learned with him. It was Shabbos Pashas, Miketz, I think, by Yigash, I think Toshin Lamed Beis by Yigash, when a whole bunch of Yidden from Russia came to the Rebbe. One of them was my uncle, his son, Sholem, and the Rebbe said, I'm going to give mashke to the Russian Yidden, especially for Chabad. And the Rebbe said, but who should I give? Kulam Ahuvim, Kulam Brurim, Kulam Gebeirim. Nevertheless, the Rebbe said, there's one person here, was is schuldig, because he's the son and brokar davur of my Melamed, which I learned by him, Mikro, Mishnah, Gemara, for many years. So I'll give him the mashke, he should bring it to Nachal HaChabad. So the Rebbe expressed that feeling. And whenever he used to come to Farbrengen, he couldn't come, he couldn't walk, so he couldn't come on Shabbos. Even on Yontiv, he couldn't. But the Vochadike Farbrengens, they would bring him by car, or the beginning, and he would have to walk out in the middle. He couldn't sit all these hours, or he came in the middle. But let's say if he came in the middle and the Rebbe saw him, the Rebbe would stand up, not mamik, but he would stand up halfway and not sit down till he sat down, or when he left, the Rebbe would look till he was out the door, he would stand up. So so his connection was there. So the way he explained to me, the Gabe, being by the Chasana, the great simcha he had, because of being the Rebbe's Malamed that brought him such a great simcha, and being with the Rebbe, being the friend of the family, so the simcha was so great, and he participated in the simcha very much. So as I said,
while we have you on, can you also maybe say some zechernes that you have from Toshin Chavtes? I'm assuming you were then in 770, well, and it was also very special. It was a 40th anniversary.
40th anniversary, right? So
special for bringing Shabbos. Maybe you can speak a little bit some zechernes.
I can just say a little bit, but the Eifem Kloli, what was going on there, that the Hiseidus was very great. There was a Hiseidus by Anash, especially by the Bochrim, and the Bochrim had a Sifa, and they got together and they made a Hachlote to learn, I think, 40 Mamorim Balpeh, and certainly on Menigla, and give 40 numbers of 40 of Matbeis. And Anash also were machlit that. Tzach wrote that to the Rebbe, and they gave the Rebbe a list of all the Mishtaktim. This brought a great Nachas Ruach to the Rebbe. Many answers that the Rebbe wrote to people in the Kesher to these Inyonim was very varime answers. And to the Bochrim also, I don't exactly remember the Loshen that the Rebbe wrote to the Bochrim. I have some place written, but I remember it's Nazeir Avarim Abriv, and the same thing to Anash, the same thing to Tzach. There's even, I remember someone reminded me of the story that the Bochrim were so beiseidus, and even giving the money was beiseidus. And there was one Bocher that really didn't feel that, why should we give the money, etc., etc. But he came later a while later, and he brought all the money that he had, anything that he had saved up from his bar mitzvah, and from his camp, and from his Hanukkah geld and everything. He brought over $3,000, and he said, if we have to give it, if we give it to the Rebbe, we give everything. That's how the Seder was. And the main people who were involved was the Noske Wolf. He was one of the machas there, and Shlomo Zarchi. I think me and my other Bachram were also involved. Wrote to the Rebbe, and I don't remember the lashon of the Rebbe's answer, but it was a very, very warm lashon. And Shabbos, after Yud Daled Kislev, by Farbrengen, the Rebbe spent a big chelik of the Farbrengen, the Geyad Chassene. The mimer that he said was a beer on one of the mamorim of the Rosh Chassene, that the Rebbe said by his Chassene. And Bechlal, he spoke a lot, and he spoke about giving a dying for all those that gave the brachas, and it seemed from the Rebbe that it's very important. And he even was Magia that Sicher, and Magia twice. It was Magia the second time when they translated into Lashon Kodesh. And the main thing is that this brother, he said it had a hemshech, because they had to learn so many hours, they had to learn so many things that people accepted upon themselves. So the Reishim that was from the 40 years, the Shnas Arbaim, it was, and Mitzad the Rebbe, it was very special. You see the Rebbe's answer, the Koli Proti letter that the Rebbe wrote to some people. He wrote it to Sach. He writes the Loshen that how bishmak it was to him to see that they gave him the brachas based on inyonim of Torah, tzedakah, and Torah, mitzvahs, and it had a hemshech for a long, long time.
Shapiro, thank you very much. We're going to move back to the chasana of Tofreish Peites in Varsha, where the chasana took place. There was a young bacher there, Rebbe Moshe Pinchas Hakayan Katz, who was a bacher, I believe, then in the yeshiva. And he was probably, I'm assuming he was about 15, 16 years old, a young bacher. Probably for him it was a tremendous reishim, the Frierdiker Rebbe coming, and the Rebbe coming, and the chasana, and the chosin mode before. Just want to make one little interesting point that he also had. We just finished off with Tavshin Chavtes, listening to Rabbi Shapiro. I remember there was a story with Rabbi Moshe Pinchas Katz, Tavshin Chavtes, that the Chassidim came into the Rebbe to give the Rebbe a bracha. So I believe one of them was Rabbi Moshe Pinchas Katz, and Rabbi Shmuel Levittin told Rabbi Moshe Pinchas Katz to give the Rebbe a bracha since he's a kohen. And from being so nervous, he just said the brachas kainim, and that's it. And then he wrote to the Rebbe an apology letter that he wasn't able to remember all those details, to remember all the brachas. And the Rebbe said a very, very special minor, which I'm sure Rabbi Katz will speak about in Mitzvah Hashem. Rabbi Katz, Bechovid.
Mazel tov. Mazel tov, mazel tov. Mein Tat hat gehabt im Schuss, zu sein auf dem Rebens Chassene, lernen dich in dem Kutmim im Dembelt in Varsha. Und die Jiden in der Bochum im Dembelt hat eine starke Gelegenheit und bekennen sich mit dem Rebbe. So, von Nummern bei sehr gewaltigen Ort. Der Rebbe verkommen nach Sach in der Tzvotsk. Und die Bochum sind gekommen auf der Tzvotsk. Und hingekommen zum friedlichen Rebbe. Und er hat die Gelegenheit, auch Rebbe mit dem Rebbe zu lernen. Und jene Tkufe haben sie ausgenutzt, die Gelegenheit, also können Rebbe mit dem Rebbe lernen. Ich denke, dass noch gewinnt in Stub. Ich gewinnt die Tschure Hayidua. Was hat uns so gehitten, Kibbutz was ein. Das Reisenstammen, was immer gedruckt schon euch. Und die Tschure von alten Rebens. Mamorim. Was der Chassene, der friedliche Rebbe, vervierte Gespräche lernen mit Rebbe Shapiro. Rebbe Shapiro gewinnt Berliner Rauf, weißt du doch alle. Und es ist also ausgekommen, als gesessen, bis mich ist zum Chossen. Mein Mail hat Matzia gewinnt, reden und lernen. Sagt zum Berliner Rauf, nu, so gab es. Rebbe Shapiro umgehen reden, aber da gerät, also ich sitze und ich war der Chassidim, auch gerät am Meschersmann. Nachdem, mein Augesessen also, als am Meschersmann, geht sich Rebbe Shapiro erklärt. Und Babetscher Rebbe, hat auch an jedem a goyen Oilom. Mit Gelegenheit und gelobt, ein Hemmschach. Menschen wird gewollt, wo kann ein Hemmschach sein. Dann mit dem Früher ist gewesen, am zu Reviöse. Ich habe der Friedrich Rebbe gemacht. Und er gesagt, euer Beritz, dass hat nicht. Und hat nicht kein Hero, dem ist nicht, also darf man dann noch einmal. Wie mir erzählt, jetzt zum Morgen, es ist noch alles gewesen, ein Hemmschach, Gdel Israel, sind gekommen, andere sind gekommen und gebringt Droschengeschenk, haben gebringt Droschengeschenk und hat getroffen, ich bin gewesen an der Sinnesmog, kann man mit der Reden lernen weiter. Wir sollen helfen, um so sicher sein, wenn Niske sehen sich mit einer $1 Matte beguf Gashmi.
Thank you very much. I want to just share with you the answer that the Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Katz, to Rabbi Pinchas Katz. In the he came into the Rebbe and he was asked to say a bracha, but he was so nervous that he couldn't say the bracha properly. So he wrote a letter to the Rebbe afterwards, apologizing. So the Rebbe wrote back to him a ksav around his letter that just like Yitzchak Avinu gave the bracha to Yaakov and Ephraim in a way of lo yadaiti, he didn't realize. So, and that bracha was a much higher bracha. So sometimes when you say a bracha in a way of lo yadaiti, I didn't realize, I didn't know I'm going to say the bracha. That bracha is really much, much greater. Tafshin Yud Daled was the Rebbe's 25th anniversary, and the Rebbe, in a surprise way, the Rebbe Farbrengen that Shabbos. I heard that there were still people that were in the shul Farbrengen after davening. Some Yidden didn't even daven, and the Rebbe came into the Farbrengen to shul, and they brought for the Rebbe wine and mezainas. And it was mamish in a sudden way. I heard that in the middle of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe told some people to go daven and come back to the Farbrengen. It was mamish sudden. So at that Farbrengen, the Rebbe said a very famous line that really defined for us what Yud Daled Kislev is. The Rebbe said towards the end of the Farbrengen that this is the day, das ist der Tag, was mit mir verbunden mit euch und euch mit mir, that they connected me to you and you to me. And the Rebbe said something to the effect that together, zusammen, we're going to work together to bring the Geula Amitis V'Hashlema. Und zusammen wollen wir ausmattern die Geula Amitis V'Hashlema. So I remember when I was a bacher once, one of the Mashpim Farbrengen, that the Rebbe over here said that mir verbunden mit euch und euch mit mir, a two-way street. That the Rebbe said, I'm connected to you and you connected to me. He was Farbrengen that in der Hashvi'i, the Rebbe had a mahalech that every chassid needs to join in the Rebbe's work. And the Rebbe said famously, Toshin Yud Aleph, from the very first Farbrengen, that I'm not doing the work for you, you have to do the work. Every single person in the Hashvi'i has to do the work and needs to feel the responsibility to bring Mashiach. And as the years moved on, the Rebbe increased that responsibility on us stronger and stronger and stronger. So a part of the Farbrengen of Yud Daled Kislev is to ask ourselves, What's our part? What do we have to do? How do we work harder to uismatir and to work hard to bring Mashiach? We have with us a very special shliach, a shliach for almost 5 decades in Miami, who amongst his tremendous pulas that he does and was mekadev hundreds, maybe thousands of Yidden to Yiddishkeit, to the Rebbe and to Chassidus, is with us. And he also has a special koch in the Aveda of bringing Mashiach. That every chassid needs to feel the responsibility to bring Mashiach. So we're going to ask Rebbe Lipsker to please share with us some Divrei Yiseiros in connection to Yud Daled Kislev, the Tagvos mit mir verbunden mit Eich und Eich mit mir. What is our job, Rebbe Lipsker? No, I think you're on mute. Rabbi Lipsker, I think you're on mute.
Hi, everybody. Say it again. This is a Farbrengen for all of us, children of the Rebbe. Celebrate the Rebbe's and our father's celebration. So just from a historical point of view, before even there was a lot of conversation about the very special day of Yud Daled Kislev, I remember my Zayda's house that he had a telephone that he could use only for the Chaver Kadisha, because at that time, according to the welfare, he wasn't allowed to have a phone. They put in the phone because he was a member of the Chaver Kadisha, so he used the phone very rarely. But every Yud Daled Kislev, he would call the Rebbetzin to wish her a mazel tov. Very interesting. And he would tell us how the simcha was among the Chassidim when that took place. Just 2 very short vignettes before I just mentioned a few words about his kashas is 2 things that made the biggest impression on people that I know in regards to the Rebbetzin. Particularly, I was talking tonight to Dr. Barry Baumel, who's one of the doctors that brought Dr. Moore, one of the doctors in Tufshin and Beis, Tufshin and Gimel. He was one of the main neurologists on this case, attend to the Rebbe. And I asked him about his iskashtus. He said to me, and he said it publicly, that he can't understand what holds back the world from accepting the Rebbe, especially those that saw the Rebbe b'chayav in a physical body. He said that he only met the Rebbe after the Rebbe was not able to speak verbally. And the Rebbe impacted him, he said, with his eyes. He said the Rebbe had such a serenity that he had to work hard on himself as a doctor to remove himself from that relationship in order to be able to do the medical testing that he was necessary in order to be a proper analysis of the situation of what was going on. And he described to me the details, which I will not address now at this moment. But the 2 things that stood out for him over the years that he told me as far as the Rebbe was concerned was 2 stories. One is that when the Rebbe said, I believe to Rabbi Weinberg, to others, in Tufshin Yud, that they should stop bothering him, because otherwise he's going to go away and nobody will be able to find him. So what impacted the Rebbe more than anything, according to the story, was the Rebbetzin saying that your father loves, my father's work will not go to waste if you don't take on this position. That impacted the Rebbe. That extraordinary relationship. Because the Rebbe said to someone, my father had one chassid, the Rebbe. The Rebbe doesn't have any chassidim like that. And the second thing was the relationship that the Rebbetzin recognized in What's the Rebbe, when she testified by the Svarim, by the bookcase, and they asked her who the books belonged to, and she said that my father belonged to the Rebbe, so for sure his books belonged to the Rebbe. So obviously that was her relationship and role with recognizing the essence of the Rebbe for each and every one of us. And so we talk about what's his kashrus, how do you be mekusher to the Rebbe? So the practical side is that the Rebbe told many people, and on Yechidus that I know he told somebody personally, he said, if you want to be mekusher to me, you learn my sichas and my mother. So that's practical. Sichas and my mother. But there's two levels of his kashrus. I know we're talking here to a lot of Yidden. Every single Yid that Rebbe said is a shliach. There are formal shluchim, and then there are Jews that each one of us is a shliach in a very important way. Being a chassid of the Rebbe and taking on the Rebbe's mission to bring Mashiach, we all become shluchim, no matter whether we do it professionally or whether we do it voluntarily. So there's a iskashrus of a chassid to a Rebbe. That iskashrus sometimes can take place in a way that's beyond our comprehension. Like I have a guy that comes to our community that he wears a Yom Yechia Dineinu Mareinu Rabbeinu Melech Mashiach Leil Vod, a big one, and he goes into a treifa restaurant, and he believes that he is connected to the Rebbe because he believes the Rebbe is Mashiach, and that's it. And even though he goes to a kosher restaurant, he puts on tefillin. Why? Because he said the Rebbe never told me to keep kosher. He told me to put on tefillin. The Rebbe, that's one level of his kashrus. On that very strange level that the Rebbe impacted every person on his level. And then there's his kasher b'shliach. What's his kasher b'shliach? So the fact of the matter is that we know that the Rebbe in his various discussions of what's a shliach and the various types of understanding the role of a shliach, agency, from Rabbi Yosef Engel, Yad Arichta, or the halacha, that his act is like your act, or mamish ki shluchim mamish. So we know that a Lubavitcher that walks in the street, and he's called a Lubavitcher, represents the Rebbe. Whether you like it or not, you represent the Rebbe. And therefore, besides the fact that we have to internally be mekusher to the Rebbe, and practically be mekusher to the Rebbe, we should know that we have no choice in the matter. And it's possible that we don't have a choice. Of course, the Rebbe said to someone, told to someone, to myself, he says, I don't take away free choice from anybody, but I would want you should do it in such a way. So I told Rabbi Klein at that time to tell the Rebbe that he took away my free choice. That's the truth. And you know what the Rebbe answered me? And it sadly wrote, Nilkach. I took it away, Taka. Because sometimes we don't have enough seichel to know what to do. So the Rebbe, in his inimitable way, in his impactful way, in his loving way, he actually directed our lives practically in every single fashion. And to tell you the relationship that we have to have with the Rebbe and what the Rebbe expects of us. So I'll tell you also another personal story. It happened in the early 1970s. At that time, Professor Branover, who was the highest ransomed Jew, I think it was 1974, that came out of Russia. And the Rebbe was very mekad of him. And he was on his way, came to Miami. I didn't know about it. I personally, at that time, had a serious medical issue. And I went to the hospital. And they did a very, very difficult test on me. At that time, that test was not yet developed properly. And in the morning, after the test, my wife called the hospital to talk to me, and I didn't answer the phone. There was another man in the same room with me. So finally, after many rings, he answered the phone, and he says, he's sleeping. He said, wake him up. He said, I can't wake him up. He's sleeping. Anyways, to make a long story short, there was a code blue. I was in a coma, they said. They couldn't wake me up. They didn't know why. Maybe the anesthesia was too strong. Maybe the test didn't work. They couldn't wake me up. My wife came rushing to the hospital. By the time she came to the hospital, there was a whole team of doctors in the room. They closed it up. It's called the code blue, which is an emergency. They can't come in. Of course, the first thing she did was she ran to the nurse's station and she called 770. Eisen 39250. That was the number we all called. If that was busy, he called 9251. And Rabbi Klein answered the phone. My wife said, I'm in the hospital with Sholem and I can't wake him up. The doctors say he can't wake him up. He said, what number are you at? She tells him the number by the nurse's station. A few minutes later, Rabbi Chalikov calls. Yasin, he wants to speak to me. So my wife says, he's in a coma. I'm in the nurse's station. She says, no, I have a message to him from the Rebbe. I need to speak with him. Anyway, she goes to the room. They won't let her in. She forces herself in. As you know, we Lubavitchers, we do what we have to do. The Rebbe says, Chalikov says he has to speak to me. It means that the Rebbe said he wants to speak to me. Anyway, she comes in, he says, gives her the phone. They connect the phone from the nurse's station to the room. Emergency. My wife says it's an emergency. She picks up the phone and Rabbi Chalikov is on the line. No, she says he can't speak. He said, puts the phone next to my ear. And the next thing I hear in the background, the Rebbe's voice, but he says, Branover is coming to Miami, and I have to make sure that I introduce him to certain professors at the university. Dr. Way, he's talking, he's awake. So what is the point here? Why am I telling you the story? Oh, the doctor said it's crazy, it's a miracle, it just happened, whatever. Chalikov didn't call me to say, how are you feeling? What is the doctor saying? He called to say what you need to do. Get out of your stupor. Get out of your coma. Get out of your Naddishkeit. You have a job to do. That's what the Rebbe wants from each and every one of us. We are living today in a time that we have with us the Rebbe's presence on a practical level. Of course, we want to see the Rebbe B'nai Bus. Of course, we want to come to Farbrengen. Of course, we want to get a dollar from the Rebbe. We miss him. And it's painful that we have to deal with these levels, that we have to go to the spiritual side. But practically speaking, the Rebbe is here with each and every one of us. And I can tell you the fact that it's so. I know it in my own life. And I'm sure that half or three quarters or everybody on this call can tell you the same thing. The Rebbe is with each and every one of us. And he expects us to fulfill the important mission that he said. There's nothing that the Rebbe said that didn't come to pass. And he said that this is the generation of Mashiach, that this is the day of Hashvi'i, that we're going to see Mashiach and we're going to experience it. It means it's happening, whichever way you're going to translate it. And so on a practical level, you ask, how can I become more connected to the Rebbe?
No, this is Shalom.
Practically, to become more connected to the Rebbe, besides the fact that you have to learn. But learning, there's two ways of learning. You sit down, you go through a sikha, from beginning to end. I know it happens all the time. And, you say it. And then there's a liba de nafshe. You learn it and you make sure that the Aveda at the end of the Sikha is as significant as the Lomdis in the middle of the Sikha. The Rebbe always said there's a practicality. So beside together with learning the Rebbe's Torah, so that your head, like it says in Tanya today, that limud Torah of the mitzvahs takes you to a higher level, the Chachma and Bina, higher than even the learning of the mitzvahs. Torah of the mitzvahs, learning it. So the learning is practical. But the key we learned in Tanya is a Maisa Hu'ikir. What the Rebbe wants us to do is to get out of our sleep, to get out of our dormancy, to realize that there's somebody knocking on the door and saying, what are you doing today? The Rebbe said to many people, and the Maisa with South Africa, a Maisa that I had, he says, call him. Rabbi Chassidim said to me, Rufem. I said, yeah, but it's not nice to call him at this time. He says, it's not nice. It's Sakonis Nefoshes. It's Buguach Nefesh. A Yid is in your community. Think about it. What would the Rebbe do? To be Mekushit to the Rebbe, you have to think about this. If I was in this, the Rebbe was in this community, wherever you are, and he had a neighbor like whoever you are, what would the Rebbe do? How would the Rebbe care about him? How would the Rebbe think about him? Would the Rebbe go to sleep before he took care of someone whose life is in danger because his children are falling off the cliff, are falling away? Would we take an opportunity to speak Lashon Hara about those children? Did you know this guy is up from Weg? As Nishya, given ois young man. Or would it burn you and hurt you and feel that it's your responsibility to sit down with him and Farbrengen with him? It's time, I'm telling you, we are in a critical moment in our history. Critical moment. The world's in a critical moment. The Rebbe said to both Shokelzach and Treiselzach, he said in the 1980s. And then he said, in order to rebuild a building, when it's shaky, it's easy to rebuild it, because then you can put in strong, powerful foundations.
Yeah,
so to be Mekushit to the Rebbe is something that is an obligation for each and every one of us. It's possible. If a simple Yid that knows nothing, that comes to shul every day, today I'm taking it to a Jew, he says, I learn my monodies every day. He said, I don't understand a word, but I say every word it says there. I don't know what he says. I said, so why are you learning it? He said, what do you mean why I'm learning it? The Rebbe said so. A Pashut guy that doesn't understand, he can't read it in English, in Hebrew. Can't read the Rambam. He reads it in English. And in English, he doesn't understand it. The Rebbe said so. That's how we need to recognize that today's celebration, of course, it's a celebration of our father, our Rebbe's wedding anniversary. It's an extraordinary day. But like the Rebbe would say, what do you take away from it? What's the Vechom? What happens tonight, tomorrow morning, that's going to make today's better, that's going to make tomorrow better than it was today? That's the key. So l'chaim, we should all be Mekushit in the right way, and we should be Zeiche Mitzvah Hashem very soon. And we should go together with the Rebbe in front of us to Yerushalayim Mir HaKodesh and the Beis HaMikdash with Mashiach together. L'chaim.
Amen. L'chaim, l'chaim. Thank you, Rebbe Lipsker, for those passionate words. There's no question that and we're going to get the job done tonight. The Mitzvah Hashem is able to see the Rebbe very, very soon. We have with us the head shliach to Colombia, who in Tovshin Lametes, there was a special Yisrael, so it was Chamishim Shana that year. I know Rabbi Rosenfeld has a special connection to that Farbrengen that took place Yud Daled Kislev. Rabbi Rosenfeld, please.
I was hoping I would speak. Can you hear me?
We hear you.
I was hoping I would speak before Rabbi Lipsker. Soll der Eberstein helfen, soll nach Riches Yomim v'shanim tevis, but we have to go to sleep with his divrei eseidus. So I'm not going to overspeak so that we don't forget his eseidus. Just one small nekuda about the Farbrengen Yud Daled Kislev Tafshin Lamites. We were Bachrim then in Tafshin Lamites. I was a little kid in Tafshin Chavtes, and in Tafshin Lamites, it's Chong Eben Tumelin, that in Tafshin Chavtes hat sich getan, in Tafshin Lamites, darf sich avadeton, and Tzach gave out a letter then. In fact, I even have a Pesach Dover of something that was given out from Hanoches Atmimim, just to see how the Achonis were done, Bekesher Machlotes Atmimim, Linatzel Yomim Elu, Beisofe, Belimedatero, Beisaskos, Bimifzoim, Kelo Limud, Maimori Kwiktush, Zadmishliter, Shenemru Bekesher Liyut Shvat, Hinenu Meitzim Leer, Kuntris Akelos Maimorim Anal, and the Bachim, we were learning Maimorim, Siches, giving tzedakah, everybody was mishtatif and everything. In fact, there's the famous story that Sach sent in the report afterwards and about the Farbrengen, Yud Daled Kislev at night. And the Rebbe asked, they've mit getanzt beim Farbrengen, meredike Werter. And the Seder by the Bachrim was unbelievable, but we weren't sure what would be the Rebbe's reaction to it. It just came after Lamed Ches. We weren't even sure. I was a chassan, I got married Yud Beis at night. So the Farbrengen was the next night. We were so excited. We felt a part of the whole Yud Daled Kislev. We even received a telegram from the Rebbetzin for the chasana, but we didn't know if there would be any, we didn't even know if there would be a Farbrengen. When the Rebbe was midia that there was going to be a Farbrengen, the Simcha was ein l'shayer, but nobody had a havamina that the Rebbe would ask for Sheva Brachas. There was a long time already that there was no Sheva Brachas. Anyway, the nusach of the Sikha, the first Sikha, the second Sikha, and then when the Rebbe asked that the Chsanim that are there, basically something unbelievable happened, and you can all see it in the Sikha. The Rebbe says in the Farbrengen, as doch da selche was teine him mevakshim. B'meile et abeten as die Chsanim v'zayin da should have Sheva Brachas. It's a modern thing. The Rebbe has to worry about those that are teine him mevakshim. I remember we spoke then. First of all, as soon as the Rebbe said that we should have Sheva Brachas, we had to run out of 770. I remember we ran to the Itkin house, the closest house to 770, to wash on Chale and come back and have Sheva Brachas. And we asked Mashpiyim afterwards, was can da sein? First of all, why did the Rebbe insist on Sheva Brachas? The Rebbe is worried about Te'enim Vakshim, and the basic answer that the Mashpiyim gave us then was, the pashtus, the Rebbe wants to have a chelik and wants to be mishtatif in the simcha of the Chassidim. And I think one of the biggest takeaways of this Farbrengen for us and for everybody is that the Rebbe is part of our life, of our daily life, of our simchas, of every single thing that we go through. The Rebbe is a part of it. And the Rebbe is with us, and the Rebbe expects from us, and the Rebbe wants us to do, and we have a meridik achrayos al shluchim to do what the Rebbe wants us to do. There's no question that we have an achrayos to do what the Rebbe wants us to do, and as shluchim, people look at us and they're waiting for us to do it. And we just have to remember the koch that we had then. That's why we have to be so thankful to the Bachrim and the Jungelite. Today's Bachrim and Jungelite remember and do and koch sich be'enarich more, at least to how I used to koch sich in my days. And thanks to them, I was able to hear the whole Farbrengen again of Yud Daled Kislev. And I suggest that everybody should sit down tonight and tomorrow and hear the whole Farbrengen and to get connected to the whole spirit of Yud Daled Kislev. And remember, it's our job, like Rabbi Lipsker said, me kennen sich nicht absagen from the achrayos. And like it was said before, it's the day that the Rebbe connected us to the Rebbe and the Rebbe to us. Just to finish with a light, very short thing. Again, thanks to all the videos and everything. A little Lubavitcher, little child, 3 years old, who was watching a video of a Farbrengen. and he sees the way everybody is singing, "We want Mashiach now." And the little child turns around to me and he says, "Ich verstehe nicht. Was hat mir jemand gesagt, we want Mashiach now? If the Rebbe is there." Today's children live with the Rebbe and live with Mashiach. Halavai, we should live with it, and we should do what the Rebbe wants from us. Soll der Rebbe helfen, man soll Shem Zeichen sein to this Galus of the Rebbe, B'Korev Mamish, und man soll sich freuen, und man soll tanzen like the Rebbe wanted on Yud Daled Kislev, und man soll rein tanzen in the Gula Shlema B'Korev Mamish.
All right, Schechter, just for a second, can I just add one little thing?
Sure. Yes.
Just one little thing I want to add, because it's a letter that I have from the Rebbe from Tavshalam Hey that is addressed to me personally. It's a prototypical letter with Chsimas Yad Ksav Yad Koche, with a note even at the bottom. And the end of that letter, the Rebbe puts Lich Melechatchila Aribet, and he puts a line. He said like this: Shalom Dave Bet, Sheikhya, etc. All what the Rebbe used to write. And they says he started Eiskim B'Tzar Chatzibut, and then B'Soichechei Chavedim Hashluchim. A private letter. He says B'Soichechei Chavedim Hashluchim. So I'm going to share it with you. So at the end of that letter, it's a short letter. I can send you copies, and it had Mitzurah B'Tei. He had a Klali Prati letter together with it. But that letter, the end of the letter, the Rebbe wrote Melechatchila Ariber, and under the Aleph of Ariber, he put with his pencil, a pen, a line, Ariber. That's the reality. We are Lechatchila Ariber people. We're not normal people. We are beyond normal, I'm telling you. We got to get into that mindset. Just a thought process.
L'chaim, l'chaim. The advantage of having a Farbrengen of Yud Daled Kislev the night before is that we can the whole day, first of all, celebrate and process what the day means to us, and in a very the way the Rebbe's words were. Today started the day Hashvi'i. That's what the Rebbe said. And today was the day that he was brought into the Avedas HaKlal. That means that today is the day that the Rebbe, in a certain sense, was the seeds were already put in the ground, and now starts day Hashvi'i from Yud Daled Kislev. So the day is a tremendous day. And the formal part of the Farbrengen of the program is officially, I guess, maybe now the Farbrengen is actually going to start. We're going to ask there are some shluchim here that are on the Farbrengen, that are on the Zoom over here. We're going to ask some of them if they can share with us some divrei yisaidus. Rabbi Schmidt, maybe you want to share some words?
I'm sure Rabbi Lipsker has more to share.
Rabbi Yeshua,
Lipsker, you can continue. The mic is open.
Of course, the mic is open. You can't bring it up. I'm sitting here.
I already started. Maybe you could continue a little bit. Rabbi L'chaim, you can continue.
It's so loud, no?
Since everybody's waiting, just for a moment, it to be I don't know, unfortunately, we're getting to the age where people look at us because we have white beards as kind of the elder guys. I used to look at guys my age and say, the Alte, I don't want to use the kind of language because, we have to be careful of the language we use, which is also parenthetical. The Shluchim should be careful in the language they use and the jokes they tell and with the balabatim, because you should know when you open your mouth, whatever you do, you represent the Rebbe. To any Jew out there, that's the Lubavitcher Rebbe is a Chassid. The Lubavitcher Rebbe is Shliach. You should know that when you're talking shul, whatever it is. I'm not going to get into that. This is not the time for that kind of conversation and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that without question, when you take a look at the simple balabatim that are completely dedicated to the Rebbe in every single way, and they'll do anything that the Rebbe says, and they can't, any question they have, they go to the Eil, etc. Everything is connected to the Rebbe. And we think, we're going to be Mefarsim Shmei Barabim. We ought to publicize the Rebbe's name. So you should know the fact of the matter is, I'm telling you this practically, dealing with people in powerful places and so forth. Powerful people. Strong people. The Rebbe publicizes you. You don't publicize the Rebbe. The Rebbe gives you credibility. You don't give the Rebbe credibility. And therefore, it's not about you having to tell people the Rebbe, who the Rebbe is Mashiach, the Rebbe is this, the Rebbe is that. All you have to do is tell them what the Rebbe wants to do. Don't tell them who the Rebbe is, because they know better than you who the Rebbe is. Because as someone said to the Rebbe, about the Friedrich Rebbe, Rebbe, so the Rebbe said, "It have gesehen, but the mich gekent." We don't know what the Rebbe is, we have zero idea of who the Rebbe was. We know that came out of this moed. And as it says, Nayim Yaim, it doesn't change. Moed has its own dignity, its own process. So we don't know anything about that. So the fact is that we have to change our modus operandi. We just have to do what the Rebbe wants us to do. We have to fulfill the Rebbe's mission. Look, what is the Rebbe's mission? The Rebbe never said, go publicize the Friedrich Rebbe, go publicize the Rebbeim. He said, do what he wanted them to do. I'm telling you, we get caught up with this secular world and social behavior, and we think we have to do this, we have to publicize. Just do what the Rebbe wants you to do. You can't imagine the impact that you will have and continue to have. And maybe, hopefully, tomorrow morning, there's be some one of us that's going to do that extra effort, that's going to break the cycle and bring Mashiach. Not bring him, he's going to megala him, going to reveal him. Because I know that we had a Farbrengen here, and there was a guy, his name was Yitzhak Greenberg. Yitzhak Greenberg was the known rabbi of the Federation. He was an Orthodox Jew, but modern Orthodox. So I had a conversation with him. His friend made us get together, and I brought him here to the shul. And we're sitting for Farbrengen. We had a very open, honest conversation. So he said he respects the Rebbe a lot. The Rebbe's ideas were brilliant. But to tell you how he perceived it, because he was a marketing guy, obviously, he said he believes that the idea of the mezuzah, powerful. It identifies a house. It makes the house feel Jewish. But he said, from a budgetary point of view, you don't need the mezuzah, just give him the cover. Because that already will take, that's the chatzonius of that process. And then he says like this to me, you know something? I've been thinking about it. This is not too long ago, a few years ago. He said, I do believe that thinking about the Mashiach personality and reading about him, because we talked about the Rambam, etc., and reading about him, and it had the occasion with Sammy Rohr. Many of you know Sammy Rohr. So his chaver said to him, how can you go to that shul when they think the Rebbe is Mashiach? Sammy came to me. He says, Rabbi Lipskid, what do you say to that? I said, let me say, bring your friend. He brought his friend. I knew that guy also. And I opened up Hilchos Melochim of the Rambam, and we learned the Hilchos of Mashiach. I said, listen, I'm not telling you who's Mashiach or not, but who do you know that has the eligibility to be Mashiach? So I said, forget about who's Mashiach, but imagine being in the generation of a Rebbe who is eligible to be Mashiach. Did you ever have that before? So the fact of the matter is that we are living in that kind of a time that is an extraordinary period, that we have an opportunity really to break through on a meaningful level. We have to just take it serious and move to the next level. The Rebbe took us all the way. The Rebbe didn't say, I did it and I'm leaving it in your hands because he wasn't able to do it. Because Mashiach can't come on his own. He needs us to be part of the system. That's what he said. I need you guys to be part of the system. Otherwise, Mashiach was going to, what is he going to go around and scream, I'm Mashiach? Please listen to me. He needs us to take the whole thing on a much more serious level, in a practical way, to make sure that every single Jew in our community, to make the Rebbe happy, every Jew in our community should know that he's a Yid. Every Jew in our community should put on tefillin. Every Jew in our community should light Shabbos candles. Practical stuff. He told us what. First time in history where Rebbe came and he condensed, the Rambam condensed the Torah into 13 principles. The Rebbe condensed the Torah into 10 mitzvahim. Imagine. That takes, you have to be a Moshe Rabbeinu, a Rambam, a Rebbe to do that. Take the whole thing and condense it down to 10 mitzvahim. Someone come and say, who told you that's the most important? Who said that? The Rebbe said that's the most important, and nobody said boo. And we're not taking it as serious as we can. I'm talking to myself too. Farbrengen. You talk to somebody else, but you mean yourself. It's not like I'm getting it done. Also got to get it done. Our motto here in the shul is over the top, get it done. It's over the top, can flee in himmel, but your feet are not on the ground. You got to get it done practically. Get it done. So I'm saying, Farbrengen, of course, we'll say l'chaim, we'll have a good time, with singing, with zogen, we'll warm ourselves up. I think whoever's running the Farbrengen should also mesader him, in the Yud Daled Kislev, you have to be a little joyful, nishnor darshanen. But let's get it done. And I'm sorry I said again, but it was quiet over there, and I don't want to. It's a shud that so many Yidden are sitting and listening, and it's quiet. So I presume that I'm going to shut my mouth and do a niggin, and then somebody else will talk. So it's not quiet. You don't waste all this valuable time of hundreds of people that are standing and listening to just wait for somebody to open their mouth. Whether you have what to say, you don't. Just say it.
L'chaim. Yeshakayach, everybody, for joining the special Farbrengen. Thank you very much for all the presenters, Rebbe Lipsker, for the fire the Kireids. And again, as I mentioned before, Sheyifula Advarim Banu, and for everybody that's here. L'chaim, maybe should help, that we should get the job done, and Mitzvah Shem be together with the Rebbe, take it from the Yad Mamish today. L'chaim. Lipsker for the fire the Kireids. All right, Posner, the mic is yours. All right, Shmuel Posner. L'chaim, maybe should help, but we should get the job done, and Mitzvah Shem be.
I was waiting for Rebbe Lipsker to say what he just said. Divas haben nicht was zu sagen, so reden. So now I'm ready to talk. As long as he was talking and he had what to say.
I didn't have what to say. I just said it anyways, because I told you nobody was saying it.
No, we'll judge that. We'll judge that. We're taking all what you said literally. You said people have nothing to say should talk.
You're an old fan because you're part of our community here, you know.
No. I have a white beard also now. So I'm like you. I follow your example. I want to talk for the simple people, the unsophisticated, the people that, you know, have been on orange shlichus. It doesn't matter, 10 years, 20 years, 2 years, 40 years, that, you know, it's right. You know, all this feierdige thing, all this feierdige Werte is wonderful and great. It's very inspiring. And then sometimes you feel that, yeah, it's great. And then you look at your reality and your reality doesn't really fit to it. And how do you apply, you know, what do you take from it in real terms? So I want to represent the simple people. The simple people is you have a shir. I have a shir tonight. It's 6 students came to learn Parsha. And so you say to them, you know, tonight's the Rebbe's wedding anniversary. And they look at you like you fell off the moon. Like, what are you talking about? You know, he's a word from the Rebbe on the Parsha. Okay, so it makes sense and it's is good. You tell them it's the Rebbe's wedding anniversary and they look like, so what is it? And then you realize that you have to find the language to be able to explain it to them. And at the same time, you're explaining it to yourself. If you have to inspire somebody else, you have to find the simple language that a person who has no idea, a 20-year-old student who has no idea what the Rebbe really is, has no idea what it means to you, and to be able to share it to them, and then to move them to act upon it. And at the same time, you're moving yourself. You're trying to inspire yourself that you should go out and you know, whatever thing you're thinking about. I'm talking, you know, the small things. Should I call this guy tomorrow? Should I go put on film with them? Should I try to get another guy to put another mezuzah up? That this is the things you have to do. And every one of us, you know, Baruch Hashem, you hear from older shluchim who have you know, many stories, many personal interactions, and then you have shluchim that, like, they have nothing. Tell me some special thing that happened to you in the Rebbe. Nothing. Yeah, no long letters and no miracles in the hospital, and, you know, all these things that, you know, are amazing and inspiring to everybody. But and you have to realize that that's not the point, because somebody said to me, like, I met a guy in shul yesterday. He said he was used to live here, doesn't live here. He came back and he saw me. He said, "Wow, you've been here for so long, so many years you've been here." I said, "Let me tell you something. It makes no difference. If I meet a student on campus and I say, you would like to put on film today, he's not impressed if I've been here a week or been here for 35 years. It makes no difference to him. To him, it's the first day I'm here." And that's how we have to look at ourselves also. Every person on shlichus, or every chassid, doesn't matter, every chassid is a shliach. You have an opportunity to meet another Jew. That's the moment you're living for. It's not about, I don't have a long history. I don't have a lot of personal stories. I'm not so inspired. I'm not such an articulate speaker. I'm not going to be able to look at that guy. He has 1,000, he has 100, he has a big Chabad house, a little Chabad house. This is not what it's about. It's about Pashut, one Yid, one mitzvah at a time. Stay focused. Yeah, if you can do big things, yeah, for sure. If you can change a whole community, if you can change a whole city, yeah, Tavila Bracha. But don't judge yourself by other people. Recognize that you have a personal connection to the Rebbe, you have a personal connection to the Eibishter. Everything that you can do that is in front of your face, go ahead and do it, one person at a time, one minute at a time. And all of us together as one army, we're going to fulfill the instructions and the orders that the commander-in-chief gave us. Mit der Zeiche sein, tanzen mit dem Rebbe, der Kras Mashiach Tzidkenu, take him yad mamash.
Amen. It's interesting. It's when the Rebbe spoke the famous Sikha of Purim and Zion, so the Rebbe again and again quoted the Rambam of also mitzvah achas echiyah esav eskol elam kul lekav schus. Could be the pshat is that people think in order to bring Mashiach, the simple things The mitzvah achas, that's what the Rebbe was looking for. The mitzvah achas, nocha mitzvah, nocha mitzvah. I'm sure everyone in our lives, we could always add nocha mitzvah, but nocha mitzvah. I see a lot of Chassidim Yidden that came to join us. If I call on you, please don't be shy, open your mic. Share some words of inspiration. Rabbi Reuben, Rabbi Mendel Reuben, maybe you want to say a par verter? Or a l'chaim after? Wir sind sehr für jeden zusammen. It's worthwhile that somebody should say a par verter. Rabbi Reuben, are you there? Maybe you could say l'chaim and say a par verter. Rabbi Spalter, you want to maybe say a few words? Rabbi Yisrael Spalter. So l'chaim after.
Rabbi Schechter, if you don't mind for a second, it's Rosenfeld. Behemshich to what you said, and behemshich to what Rabbi Posner said about doing one thing. In my second year that I was in Bogota, I sent a duch to the Rebbe, and then we had to send a duch, a very long duch. The duch be'etzem went to Rabbi Chadukov, not to the Rebbe. And in the duch, I put down a little prat, and I wrote that even though it's something not important, but since I'm writing the duch anyway, so I'm writing it in the duch. So the Rebbe answered on that. The Rebbe apparently went through the duch, and on that little piece where I wrote, it's a little thing, the Rebbe zugezeichnet, Ayin, Rambam, the Maramakim of one thing, and with one action, he tips off the whole world, lekav zchus. So this was an answer on the duch, and I'm sure many, many, many people had that same answer. I remember when we just got here, and today also, you hear about places that have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and that's why what Rabbi Posner said is so important. Remember that one Jew that you're meeting today, Shkeach Rabbi Posner.
Rabbi Yossi Lu, you want to say maybe a par verter? So l'chaim. Sorry for calling people out, but as even Zitzo Yidden zusammen, we may as well spend our time wisely.
Rabbi Rosenfeld, I'm honored to welcome you to the club of small people. By mir bist du nicht ein kleiner Mensch, but now I'm overwhelmed to have in the club of simple people. But from the Vikings, everybody looks like they're really big, which is the way it should be. Bei sich allein darf man wissen, es ist keine kleine Garnisch. Aber man guckt auf jene, darf meinen, jene ist doch a größer. It's very good, very good.
Okay, as Avi said, that people are not talking. Rabbi Lou, Rabbi Itkin, Rabbi Fritze Itkin. Ich sage ein paar Wörter. Anyways, the Eibusher should help that this Farbrengen should be pale pool also, and we should, we said already a few times, Zenzach should mit den Rebben, that's the kavanah to finish the job already. The Eibusher should help. We should end the job very, very soon and see the Rebbe take it from a Yad Mamish. Vechom, Vechom. Thank you all for joining.
Amen.
Nehei lo yishoma